Good evening and welcome to the Town of Babylon Planning Board. Today is the 10th of June. We do have one public hearing. So before we start the public hearing, I'd like to read this into the record. The Planning Board shall have the right to rely on any information that is presented by the applicant. If any such information is later found to be inaccurate or incorrect, the Planning Board may determine that any approvals, building permits, or other actions previously granted in connection with the application are null and void. Could you lead us in the pledge? I can. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Patrick Halpin.
Present.
Frank Santos. Julianne Nolan. Dan Trushin.
Present.
Ed Wynn.
Present.
Juan Leon.
Present.
James Vaccaro.
Present.
Rich Grow. Greg Gaxiola. Rich Casey. And Nunzio Russo.
Okay, we have a quorum.
First item on the agenda, public hearing, site plan review, job number 23-08A, Acadia Republic Farmingdale LLC, proposes to construct 2 single-story warehouses that will total 58,000 square feet and 1 single-story leasing office totaling 7,000 square feet in order to develop a trucking, logistics, and storage yard along with associated site improvements.
Okay, could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is William Bonesso. I'm a partner with the law firm of Forcelli, Deegan, Tirana, 333 Earl Ovington Boulevard, Uniondale, New York. And I'm here this evening on behalf of Acadia Republic Farmingdale LLC. That is the applicant in this site plan approval application. The applicant is the owner of the subject parcel of property, which is situated on the west side of Broad Hollow Road in East Farmingdale in the town of Babylon. It is.
Before you go any further.
Yes, sir.
Have you had the opportunity to review the memo dated June 6th from the Commissioner of Planning, Rachel Skelfo, regarding this application?
Yes, we have.
Are there any issues, any concerns, anything that you would like to bring to the board's attention prior to your presentation?
No, we have reviewed that. As we go through the hearing, you're going to hear tonight not only from me, but in a moment from Josh Bissinger. He is from Acadia. He's going to give an overview of the site history here, talk about some of the very interesting challenges that this property presents in terms of redevelopment. We also have our site engineer, Courtney Riley from VHB Engineering. She'll be going through the plan itself and what has been incorporated in order to address many of the items that were identified by the planning department in its lengthy review of this project.
Does your client have any issues regarding any of the conditions, covenants, and restrictions?
We do have some questions and concerns regarding some of the conditions, and they really relate more to the timing as to when they get imposed. So we'll be addressing those as we go forward. I just mentioned both Courtney and Josh will be speaking. We also have here to answer any questions or address comments. We have here representatives also from VHB who performed the traffic study, also a member of their aviation team, being that we are in such close proximity to the airport. And we also have the environmental consultant, Rue Inc., a representative from that company here to address environmental concerns, because this site is also an issue, a site where there is some contamination. DEC investigated it and has accepted a site remediation plan, but we'll get into that in the course of the process. Before the board is an application for this approximately 19-acre parcel situated on the west side of Broad Hollow Road. We front on 3 streets. In addition to Broad Hollow, we front on Conklin to the north and East Carmen to the west. Although we only intend to have access to and from the site from 2 streets, that being Conklin and from Broad Hollow. No access whatsoever, vehicular, pedestrian, or any other form of access is proposed for East Carmen. The site is situated in the G industrial zone. It is surrounded pretty much, with the exception of to the west where there are single-family residences. On the north side of the property to the west is our G industrial and E commercial zoned properties. There's the firehouse just across East Carmen. To the north is Conklin, and to the north of that are industrially zoned and developed parcels. To the east is Broad Hollow Road. To the east of that is the movie theater and the shopping center, also industrially zoned property. And then to the south of us is a strip center and some other uses also in the G industrial zone. The proposal is to redevelop this site, which has been undeveloped basically for the last 20 years, with an outdoor storage facility and with ancillary and supporting buildings totaling approximately 65,000 square feet, broken up into 3 one-story buildings. The use is one that is permitted in the zoning district, albeit we will need some relief from the zoning board. We'll need some variances in connection with parking. We'll need variances with regard to the number of buildings, and we'll need a special exception for outdoor storage, not in a rear yard. And the reason why we can't put it in a rear yard is because we have 3 frontages. So we really don't have a rear yard. So consequently, we'll need some special exception relief in that regard. We do, however, delineate where the storage areas are, and you'll hear from Mr. Bissinger as to what more specific uses of the property would likely be. This application has been filed since February of 2023. It has undergone extensive review, not only by the Town of Babylon Planning Department, which has issued comments, and we've addressed those comments in revised plans that we've submitted, but there are also a number of other reviewing agencies and jurisdictional agencies involved in this site, which is what makes this such a challenging development project. The property is within the Republic Airport RPZ, Runway Protection Zone, which is an FAA delineated area that they seek to ensure that the number of buildings, the types of buildings, the heights of buildings are limited. They look to make sure that the activity and type of use of the property limits the occupancy of the property to keep it to a low occupancy use, because they don't want a lot of people or tall buildings and highly occupied buildings in a runway protection zone, whether it be for arriving or departing flights. We have DOT that has reviewed this project extensively, because the 2 roadways where we will access from are both New York State roadways. And then we have also the issue of the contamination on site, which again, as noted, we have a DEC approved site remediation plan, which has to be addressed. Now, in addition to working collaboratively with those entities, we have also done some significant outreach. We've met with representatives of both the Woodland Civic and the East Farmingdale Civic Association and given them an overview of what the project entails. We've also reached out to the 2 chambers of commerce in the area, and we've had multiple communications and meeting with the fire department as well. So we think that, and we've incorporated much of what has been requested into the plan, and again, you'll hear that in greater detail from Ms. Riley. But we feel that based upon the limitations and restrictions that this property maintains based on its location, based on its history, that this development is one which will be the best development for the community. It'll be low impact in terms of activity. It'll be almost invisible based on the way that we have designed it and landscaped it and bermed it. And again, you'll see details on that. And it will be the least impactful use that can occupy this property while still being able to to develop it. So with that being said, unless there are any questions of me, I'll bring up Mr. Bissinger to go through the details of the project.
Do any of the board members have any questions at this time? No. Okay, please proceed.
Good evening. Thanks so much for having
Would you please
us.
state your name and address for the record?
So my name is Joshua Bissinger. It's like Kissinger with a B, Bissinger. I work for Acadia Realty Trust. We are the parent company of Acadia Republic Farmingdale LLC. My title is Senior Director of Development. We are based at 411 Theodore Fremd Avenue in Rye, New York.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Please proceed.
So I'm just going to give a little bit of background and overview because this is a strange site and it has a very long history. So who is Acadia? Just a quick background. We're a publicly traded owner of shopping centers and open air retail. And we have multiple properties on Long Island, in Smithtown and in Jericho. They're all generally shopping centers. And I'll kind of get into how we came to own this property, but generally we're very involved in the communities that we own real estate in, being in the retail business. And so as a customer-centric kind of group, hopefully it's apparent that we've taken that sort of approach with the project. We're very keenly aware of the communities that we're in, and it's just good business for us to do so. So we'll go through the history, but this 19-acre site, as Bill alluded to, has had many failed starts, and those all come down to the aviation issues here. And we'll talk about those. But the biggest thing to know is that there's been many different stakeholders to navigate, not just the airport. So it's been us, the private landowner of the site, the FAA, Republic Airport staff locally, and then Republic Airport is owned by the New York State Department of Transportation Aviations Division. And the job of the airport is to protect, people and property on the ground in the runway protection zone. And the FAA has a lot of rules about how they're supposed to do that. Short of acquiring the property, the airport is supposed to then work with local towns and property owners to make sure that anything that is built in these zones is compatible with airport operations. And for us, that's what's prevented development historically. Now, what we've tried to do is strike a balance between something that is commercially viable, that we can rent out and do so profitably given the cost of construction, while also maintaining a low density of people and creating something that's friendly to the flight path. So those goals are really very much at odds with each other, right? Developers want density, airports want nothing on the property. So we've been working very closely with all of those stakeholders for the better part of 2 years to come up with a plan that we're all comfortable with. Right now, we have been working with the airport, and I don't know if anyone is here from the airport, but we have our proposal into the FAA, and we've been willing to actually put a deed restriction on the site that would memorialize our agreement, and we'll talk about the use, occupancy, and kind of no-build areas. But we're really serious about working with them on a plan that everyone is comfortable with and will run with the land forever. So just keep all that in mind with the site because it's not a normal property. So going back in time, some of you might be familiar with the Stu Leonard's plan that I have up here. This was the first project proposed for the site. Fairchild Corporation, who owned and operated the airport, sought to monetize their assets, and this was one of their properties that they owned in connection with their operations. When they wound down, they went into the real estate business. So this was a 232,000 square foot project. Stu Leonard's had signed a lease. This board had actually approved a site plan, and they'd pulled building permits and started construction. If you look at Google Earth, you'll see building foundations on the property. So they started this project, and the Department of Transportation Highways Division rejected their application for a curb cut. And they did so citing aviation safety issues from the airport. And so that whole project went to a halt. They all went to court, and this was, again, Fairchild, but Acadia, we actually were the lender on the property. So in 2004, Acadia had a loan out on the property. They all went to court. Stu Leonard's went to Airport Plaza, and that whole deal fell through, and then Acadia ended up taking the property after a legal battle in 2012 through a deed in lieu of foreclosure. So my predecessors then kind of picked up the baton. They tried to build another shopping center, and you'll see on the plan many, many fewer buildings. There's a clear area to the right side of the screen where there are no buildings, 164,000 feet of retail. Again, this was deemed not to be compatible with the airport, and they rejected the curb cut application, citing aviation safety. And so there were many different iterations proposed, but it all comes down to too many people on the site. There were thousands of parking spaces, grocery stores, restaurants, lots of people that would be coming through the site. And so you can understand the airport's concern. So, I don't know why it's coming up like this. But anyways, what we're trying to do here is far, far less intense in terms of the land use. And I don't know why the rendering's not coming up, but on our 19-acre site, we're proposing 65,000 square feet. And when you think about 19 acres, a site like that can accommodate far greater density. So what are we proposing to build and why? In our extensive research about airports and the rules that they have to follow and really trying to understand our land use from their perspective, we did a lot of research with our aviation consultant on what is the FAA seeking. And aside of no development, we tried to find what would be permitted uses and things that we could point to. So in one of the published FAA guidelines around land use, airports, and compatibility, there was a provision that we found that states recommended land use. They prohibit residential. They cannot have residential, but residential land use is prohibited, but we would allow for low density, less than 5 people per acre industrial development. So that's really been kind of our mantra. How can we develop with less than 5 people per acre? And on the 19-acre site, that's 95 people, so really not a lot. And that's what we are designing to here. We've done a lot of different scenario analysis with peak parking demand, the types of uses, and all in all, that's what we're trying to achieve here, is really very low occupant density for the airport. So I think Bill touched upon the collaborative process I had in my notes here, but we have spent a lot of time on this with all the parties involved to get to this point. So looking at potential tenants and users, the biggest challenge of a property like this is that we don't know exactly who's going to come. And it's very tough for us to restrict hours of operation, for us to say cars will be parked here and maybe pallets will be parked here. At this point, we're seeking some flexibility. And we'll talk about the design. We've really tried to hide it, to make it disappear, to make this something that the community is not really aware of compared to some of the other sites around, which I know are concerns that we don't want another junkyard here, right? So keeping that in mind, what we really envision here are maybe truck parking and storage, trailer parking and storage, vehicle rentals, fleets are parked here, perhaps equipment rental or equipment storage for construction, and then lastly, maybe material storage as well. We also could have some light industrial uses, like perhaps a mill worker would set up their shop here and keep their supplies on the storage yard. We're just trying to keep an open mind. And in meeting with some of the civic organizations, the Chamber of Commerce of Farmingdale actually, one of their members came up to us and said, wow, I actually have some of my clients who bank with me who have nowhere to park their trucks. They don't have a place to put their fleets. And when you think about all of the warehouse development that's happened in the tri-state over the past decade, it makes a lot of sense from like a supply and demand perspective. The sites with industrial zoning where buses were parked, where fleets used to live, they've been built for warehouses and other uses. So purely from like a business perspective, we see a lot of demand and a need for a place to park all of this stuff and store it, just simply because a lot of those sites have been built into warehouses already. So hopefully that makes sense as to like what are we trying to put here and why. But generally speaking, most of these uses operate off hours. They're not customer centric. They support the industrial economy. And for them, it doesn't make sense to have trucks coming and going at 9 a.m. when people are bringing their kids to school. They want to go off hours, and it makes sense for them not to pay their drivers or others to work, just to sit in traffic. So we do envision this having some off-hours component, and frankly, from a traffic perspective, it would probably be better to have flexible hours so that people can avoid those peak times. So the property does have a history with the environmental contamination. This is a picture of just the Fairchild facility across the street, and it was remarkable what they accomplished, during World War II and the aircrafts that came out of here. But unfortunately, like some of these other facilities around Long Island and elsewhere, they did unintendedly, have environmental contamination. So I want to make it very clear that this contamination is extremely well understood, and we are working under the purview and very capable hands of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. And so this site has been studied by the DEC, and they led the investigation since the 1980s. And so they also did some work in connection with the New York State Department of Health. And so there's 2 areas of contamination. As you can see from this diagram, the borings and studies have been extensive, and we have hundreds of pages of results from over the years that the DEC performed. So there's 2 areas of contamination, and it is stable. There's a chromium area and a PCB area, and these are metals. They're not moving, and they're not contaminating the water or running from the site. And so the proposed intervention here is a site cap, which is very customary for a site that has heavy metals. And so what we will be doing is following everything the DEC has outlined in terms of the construction. There's a site management plan which goes into soil handling and making sure that none of the contaminants leave the site, and the ones that do are taken to a disposal facility properly. We'll be working under the capable oversight of Rue Associates and the DEC, so 2 very, very established groups to be reporting on the site. And then when we finish the removal of some of the soils, we'll be rebalancing the soils and then putting the cap over the property. And then any buildings will have sub-slab depressurization systems, and the whole site will be monitored. So there's a very, typical plan established here. We're all very comfortable with it. We've done extensive diligence to understand it. And we just want to convey that this is something that is customary and will be addressed in connection with the development. So today, there's no controls on the site other than a fence. So this is the best way to address the contamination, is to develop the site. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I know I covered a lot very quickly and gave you a 20-year history in like 7 minutes, but I tried to distill it to the most relevant facts so you understand the many different obstacles that we've kind of had to navigate in coming up with what do we build on this after all the different attempts to develop of the past. So.
Okay, we appreciate your presentation. Julianne? Is that on?
Is this going to be 24/7 access of these trucks?
So as we don't know the tenants yet, we are proposing open-ended hours of operation. We're willing to discuss ways to work through, I think Bill had talked about, when we sign leases and know who the tenants are, we're happy to address any issues of quality of life or traffic, but we don't know who the tenants are yet, so it's been hard to establish hours of operation.
And do you anticipate electric trucks?
Potentially. I know that there is some conflicting with the airport with lithium-ion batteries, and so we had talked to truck charging companies. I just don't think we can have a lot of them on the site.
And as far as the low density of people per acre, how do you anticipate 95 when you have quite a bit of storage here for the truckers and then employees within the building? How are you anticipating to keep that below 95?
So not in the plan, I don't think, and Courtney will touch on this about the site plan. We've amended the site plan of 95 employee parking spaces. So I know the whole site is technically a big parking lot, so that's the one. In terms of the uses though, I mean, if you've ever, there aren't facilities like this here, but they're generally not active facilities. The trucks are parked, things are stored here, and we've ran analysis just to see how many people could be coming, trying to pull other comparative, like looking at other sites, and it's just not typical for this sort of use. And if you look at the square footage of the buildings, there's very little space to actually occupy and use. So 65,000 feet on 19 acres. I mean, I'll have Courtney probably speak more about this from the technical side, but from my perspective, the way that we're going to enforce it is with the deed restriction, and that deed restriction will say no more than 5 people per acre at any given time, peak occupancy, no buildings in the landing zone of the runway protection zone, and that will run with the land. So that's how we're proposing that it's enforceable.
So your truck storage is for commercial truck storage. It's not like you're looking for people to come in with RVs or boats or any other type of outdoor vehicular storage, strictly commercial trucking storage.
Trucks, vans, we don't know the specific uses, but this is intended to be an industrial outdoor storage facility, not a retail facility.
Thank you.
Ed?
What materials do you anticipate to be storing on the site?
Yeah, so we've spoken, and we will not have any organic materials. That is not allowed, actually, under the airport. There's concerns over birds, so it will not be organic. We expect it would be construction materials, perhaps lumber, raw materials, but non-organic. The dominant use we expect is vehicles, but there are users that have, maybe it's a building supply company and they have a small shed where they store their wood or something of that nature. Generally B2B sort of uses, they do have a need to keep materials for outdoor storage as well.
Juan?
Regarding the materials, do you anticipate any of these materials being hazardous or combustible?
I don't expect it to be, but if there's, I'm sure if there's local code regarding fireproofing or sprinklered, or if it's a special use, then we haven't talked much about it, but I'm sure that that we would just follow the local code if there's an ordinance on that. Or if there's a concern around that, we can address it.
Okay, well, I guess my question is, I mean, are you going to have any, like, flammable materials? I mean, as far as gasoline or anything derived from that?
Yeah, so Courtney Riley, VHB Engineering.
Okay, hold on. Are you going to speak now?
I just want to be able to answer his question.
Okay.
Go up to the microphone.
Yes, sir.
I have to swear you in. Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Courtney Riley, VHB Engineering, 100 Motor Parkway, Suite 350.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Please proceed.
Based on conversations with Republic Airport, no combustibles, no organic materials, nothing that would bring any rodents, birds, anything that would, so again, no batteries. What we anticipate, or what discussions with the airport has been materials and vehicles in nature.
Thank you.
Dan?
Hi. So my first question is, you don't expect any trucks to be idling at any point in time?
No, we'll commit to that.
Okay, great, because that's one of the covenants and restrictions.
Yeah, no
My-
issue with that one.
All right. And then, was there a sound test performed to identify any sounds on the property or vibrating from the airport or 110 through the property to the neighborhood?
So we've not conducted a sound study yet. What we do know is that from a truck idling standpoint, it is certainly less in decibel than the airport itself. But that is certainly something we could work with the town with.
Great.
Please state your name for the record. Mr. Groh.
Rich, you have to come up.
Rich, you have to come up so we can...
Come here, Rich.
Please.
We're requesting a noise study to address the impact on the residential properties on East Carmens.
Understood?
That's very important. Okay.
And then, are any of the trucks going to be exiting onto 110?
So I think for everyone's benefit, Courtney will walk through all the technical aspects of traffic and sight lines
Okay,
and
so why don't we-
neighborings and,
why don't we hold
yeah.
that
So I was hoping to give the overview of the uses and the why, and now she will explain the how.
I have a question about the uses.
Yeah.
So you're only allowing trucks or some type of fleet, vans, things like that. There's going to be no, what are they called? The big trail, I can't think of.
Tractor trailer.
No, just the back part.
Containers?
Containers.
We could have container storage,
Okay, and then for the trucks
but
that
it
are,
would be restricted in height.
okay, and in some type of visual aspect or two, must be painted, maintained, things like that will be in the leases?
That's fine, and we'll talk about the screening and the intent of the design. So if there's something that you want in terms of height or visibility, that's
And there
fine.
won't be any shanties built for storage of material for,
No,
regular-
only buildings per the plan are approved at a later date.
Okay, and then as far as the tenants, is there also going to be something in the leases regarding putting drip pans for trucks that are non-electric and things like that to catch any potential oil that's going to go on the surface and then go into the collection of the water basins?
That's something that we can review.
Okay, if we
Oh,
request,
you have to speak up.
I said, I'm sorry, that's something that we can review. We
if
haven't
we put
discussed
that as
that.
a covenant restrictions, would you have any requirement?
What we could do is, from an engineering standpoint, we've used like oil water separators. So it's actually not a pan underneath the truck. Otherwise, the trucks can roll over it and damage anything. So typically, what we could do is do like an oil water separator into the drainage.
Hello. To the homes in the back of the property, what is the barrier? What is the setback? What is the,
So I'm going to go through the rest of the presentation that walks through
All
the
right, so
site
why don't
plan.
we-
Hopefully,
why-
that'll answer some
Why
more
don't
of
we
the
hold
questions.
that question? Did you want to?
I have a quick usage
Okay.
question. To piggyback on what Dan said with oil and vehicles, will any vehicle maintenance be performed on site?
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially?
That's a use. I mean, if you have a fleet, you have to maintain it.
Okay.
Mr. Groh?
Yeah, so we have had problems with trucking operations with the drivers doing maintenance on their own trucks. It's been a problem throughout the town. If any of that type of activity was proposed, would it be more in a controlled environment? It just hasn't worked out,
So I mean, one of the potential uses that we looked at would be like a fleet maintenance facility, and if the buildings could all accommodate some sort of maintenance facility, like a customary garage or something. These are just potential buildings that would be finalized for the tenants, but this is not expected to be, an individual coming. It would be a corporate entity signing a large lease. That's what we're expecting.
So, right. So all work would be performed indoors if that tenant came along, as well as you know, Suffolk County Pollution Control would be required to review and approve, and that is already in the covenants. So within the covenants does have Suffolk County Pollution Control.
Another question from
Just
Dan?
about the management side.
Sure.
So is there going to be an office on site for someone to be there, ensuring that all of these requirements through the leases and through the covenants and restrictions are properly followed? Or is there going to be a roaming manager that comes and checks it every so often? How do you plan on that working?
Yeah, we do not have an on-site management office plan, but we typically manage our properties with regional teams. So we have, properties in the region, and there's a regional manager who is responsible for visiting and covering those assets.
And how about security? Since you're not going to have an on-site manager, how do you manage your security
Yeah,
personnel?
each tenant, the way it's configured is a 3-tenant plan. Each one has a fence and a security gate around it. So it would be the tenant responsibility to maintain their security gates, but everything is secured.
Okay, let's hear from VHB.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So as we mentioned, one of the largest limitations of the property is the RPZ, which is the runway protection zone. What's on your screen right now is the approach, and as you could see from this diagram, that the property is limited in where they can develop, and you could see particularly where tenant A is completely out of the RPZ. The other two buildings are within the departure RPZ. The RPZ is calculated essentially a trapezoid based on the runway elevation, and these two areas are created. In our initial discussions with Republic Airport, it was encouraged to try to keep all buildings out of this area. However, they did state that at a minimum they wanted all buildings out of the approach, which we have completed. It should be noted that the approach RPZ is about 12 of the 19 acres, and the departure RPZ is 11 acres, and they overlap. This only leaves the 19-acre property about 2 acres where tenant A is to be developed. So as you can see here on the screens, that there are other buildings within both the approach and the departure. There's actually an existing 11 buildings, which is consistent within the town and within the RPZs. The previous applications, as Josh had mentioned, that were for this property, on this property, had over 10 buildings, and we are now limiting it to 3 buildings. One of them completely out of the RPZ and 2 solely in the departure. So this project has been significantly reduced based on, again, working with the New York State DOT as well as Republic Airport and the FAA guidelines. When we initially came to the town back in 2022, going into 2023, one of the comments that was made is about the visual screening, to make sure that we were using the property, developing the property, and limiting all visuals from not only Carmen's, but also on Conklin and also on Broad Hollow. It was also requested that one of the previous applications had a curb cut on East Carmen's, and it was requested that that be removed, and so it was. So again, there is no access on East Carmen's. The subject property is located within Industrial G, and the parking itself required based on this code is 439 parking spaces. As mentioned previously, we will be proposing 97 parking spaces, and this plan has been provided recently to the planning department. You can see on the different areas that the parking is limited just in front of each of the buildings, and then the rest of the area, to the best of our ability, the loading areas were placed in the center of the property, so that, again, with that visual screening, it would be reduced. The front yard setback is 10 feet from any of those front yards. Currently, Building B on Carmen's is set back 30 feet. Building C on Broad Hollow is over 300 feet. And per the code, a side yard setback is 19 feet, and Building A is proposed to be 102 feet. The project goes well beyond all the code requirements for building setbacks. As for building coverage, again, per the Industrial G, the maximum building coverage is 40%. The proposed project only provides 7.74% of buildings and 28% of storage area, totaling 36%, which again is less than the 40% required. And the code height is 35 feet, based again on the RPZ and the limitations of that. We are well below the height allowed as well. So in speaking with the civic leaders, it was mentioned that East Carmen's is sometimes used as a cut-through. This was, again, another reason why we eliminated the curb cut. But going a step further, we also eliminated all left turns out of Conklin. So all truck traffic must go towards Route 110 and then eventually to the expressway. As part of the East Carmen's, as part of discussing with this, not only the civics, but the fire department on East Carmen, they requested an easement. This easement is about 8 feet. This allows the fire trucks a little bit more maneuverability coming out of their driveway. Again, on Conklin, one of the requests from the New York State DOT, which Acadia accommodated, was to do a roadway widening. This means that Acadia will be ascertaining a portion of their easement, portion of their property to the DOT, which allows now a left turn in from Conklin. So if you're on Conklin, you're coming from down 110, you're going to Conklin, they will now have a dedicated left turn into the site, which currently does not exist today. In order to do this, we had to widen the roadway, which is one of the New York State DOT's requests. Broad Hollow Road will have a right-in, right-out. However, no trucks will be allowed to go south, meaning that they cannot go south as per the New York State DOT requirement. Additionally, a right turn lane has been created along Broad Hollow Road. So you'll see the gas station, There's actually a future bus stop right to the south of the gas station, and then there's a dedicated right turn lane that will be going into the property. This allows the trucks to pull off, decrease their speed, and get into the site. That doesn't exist today. VHB conducted a comprehensive traffic and parking study for the project through the SEQRA process. This has been reviewed by the town's consultant as well as the New York State DOT. VHB studied 4 intersections, including Broad Hollow and Conklin, Conklin and Carmen's, Broad Hollow and the Airport Plaza access, as well as Conklin and New Highway. The study concluded that the parking provided will be more than adequate, despite asking for a severe variance from 436 parking spaces down to 97. In regard to the traffic use, it generates a fairly low to moderate number of peak trips during the peak period due to the nature of the business, and that we don't suspect that any large surges of traffic based on the limited amount of employees. I know there was a question previously. These buildings, and we could pull up the building footprint, have approximately 1,000 square foot, if not less, of like office space within there. And so a lot of these industrial uses have, again, limited staff within the buildings. In preparation of the TIS, VHB took a conservative approach due to the unknown nature of the tenants. This approach was reviewed and accepted by the New York State DOT for their roadways. And any of the mitigation is the mitigation I just mentioned, which was, again, the easements. So on this next slide, you'll see these easements. So on Carmen's Road, again, we take about 8 feet of the property to allow the fire department access of the roadway. On Conklin, you can see we take a portion of the roadway to allow a left turn lane in. In discussions with Suffolk County DPW, they are planning, there is a master plan for a future bus rapid transit system. In their future plans, this is where they've already projected this bus stop to be, so we're showing it here. And again, that right turn lane into the site. Again, aligning with some of the residential concerns, again, no traffic on Carmen's, no idling of vehicles. We've also created this long internal roadway. So a lot of times with these industrial properties, or that you've seen before, short driveways or don't have capability, a lot of on-site. And what we did is we created this long, in concert working with the planning staff, this long internal roadway, so that if a truck or some vehicle was waiting, that they're waiting on site and they're not waiting on the street side. So landscaping improvements. So starting at East Carmen's, we created berms. These berms range between 3 to 4 feet in height. We also have a 6-foot vinyl fence where the residents are across. We do have single trees, and we have some visuals for you later on in the presentation to see what this looks like across from the fire department. All species are going to be non-invasive, multi-seasonal, so it's not just during the summer or winter or fall. We've also graded the site to be lower. So the site is actually already about 3 to 4 foot lower. This actually helps us in that screening. So now you have a site that's 4 to 5 feet lower in different places. Now you have a 4 to 5 foot berm, and then you're putting 4 to 5 feet on top of that of screening. Now we've been able to, not only with sight and visual lines, but now we've been able to create an area where if there is a box truck, tractor trailer, that they wouldn't be seen from any of the roadways. All plantings will be irrigated to make sure that they stay in place. And per code, it should be noted that approximately 4,000 square feet would be required, and we are providing 240,000 square feet, which is almost 30% of the site dedicated to landscaping. So as we go through some of these line of sights, wait for it to load. Okay, so this is from East Carmen's. And what we did is, it's called a line of sight. We take the elevation of the roadway, we take our proposed elevations, and we said if someone was driving in the car, what would they be able to see? Also important to note that the installed height of a lot of the shrubs is about 5 feet, which is really big for a shrub. And we are limited in the height that they could grow to. So we had to pick certain species that could only grow up to about 18 feet. We can't have something that grows too much because, again, our RPZ that's in this place. So this is a line of sight from East Carmen's showing that if a vehicle was driving down the roadway and we did have a truck there, that they wouldn't be able to see it as they drove. And then this is on day one. 10 years later, it would be even screened more. On East Carmen's also is a vinyl fence. So you could see here what we did is we took a visual. Here's a vinyl fence. This vinyl fence sits behind this evergreen screening. And again, this is a real picture that we took and did the elevations of where a truck would actually sit along this property line. Along Conklin, again, we did the same. From this corner, we did wrap around some of the trees, and we do have a visual that's on this next page that, as you could see, we have the vinyl fence that's along Carmen's. We put some nice street trees, and then we did evergreens along. Anytime you have a roadway intersection, we do have to be careful of our sight triangles, which is why we also don't have evergreens as much on this side as well. From the Broad Hollow standpoint, these trees are able, again, to get up to about 18 to 20 feet, ensuring that we're staying underneath the RPZ guidelines. And what we do have here is that you actually have some existing vegetation that would remain. This is on the adjacent property. And then again, a berm, shrubs and plantings along. And then what we're, again, trying to do is take away any of those visual concerns from all the roadway frontages. All lighting will be dark sky compliant, per town code. And at this point, if you have any more questions, hopefully this answered some of them, happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. Julianne?
Nunzio, could you go back to the screen, please, that shows the bus stop?
Sure.
Okay, so my comment here is I feel that that's just such a dangerous spot for that based on the proximity of the gas station and vehicles exiting that gas station and exiting Conklin. I think that it would be a better place to put it south of your curb cut on Broad Hollow Road.
So this location was not picked by our team. This is actually per the Suffolk County DPW master planning. Certainly, we will work with the planning staff and help relay that message.
Tell them also about where our original curb cut was and why it was, who moved it back.
Yeah, so we did originally have a curb that was actually closer towards the intersection. New York State DOT made us move it back, and certainly we will work between the DPW and the DOT entrance. Not surprising with a traffic signal located at 110 in Conklin, and then the airport plaza, they wanted it right in between. So we are limited as well on where we could actually put our access.
Any other questions? Okay, Dan?
Sorry, I'm the inquisitor. So my question is, great that they're not going to be exiting on 110 because clearly there's no lane for them.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to be, besides signage, ensuring that happens since there's going to be no on-site management? Is there going to be some type of concrete barrier that prevents a tractor trailer from driving through or things like that?
Correct. So there's actually, the state has required almost like a concrete pork chop that would help, and the radiuses that would actually help not make it comfortable. So they wouldn't be able to do that, as well as obviously a lot of on-site signage.
Okay, and then my next question has to do with the snow removal. This is primarily going to be parking and storage, but luckily it's a few feet down. But where are you going to put the piles of snow? Because that's going to affect people's vision if we have like a unusual high snow season.
I mean, on-site? Yeah. So on-site, we do have some landscape areas. I mean, at this point, with this much, with the pavement, the owner would have to alleviate some of the storage area towards snow.
And then I know that you mentioned that, and as for the thing, the area has to be cleaned 4 times a year per code. But are you going to have some type of street sweeping in the area and cleaning of the perimeter space?
Yeah, we're expecting to handle all of the common area maintenance, and then we would be billing back to the tenant. So that's all exterior landscaping, street cleaning, all of that common area would be maintained by the landlord and the management company.
Okay, while you're here, Mr. Groh raised an important point before that we've seen in other facilities where you have this kind of activity, and that is the kind of repairs. I'm not just talking about a simple repair, but major repairs that are being done. And would you be willing to agree to a CNR with no outside work being done, and it must be indoors, so that you're able to control the fluids and whatever else
Yes.
might be a result of the repairs?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, all right. Okay, hold on. Let's let Julianne ask this question.
Well, I'm just going to follow up on Dan's comment. So CNR number 17, it does reflect the applicant owner agrees to policing the entire site for all non-contained or free-blowing trade waste debris, which shall be removed from the property daily.
Correct, Dan?
And then as far as the traffic study that was performed, did it include the intersection of Conklin and Broad Hollow Road / Route 110, and how many trucks can line up during peak hours of traffic during rush hour?
So it was done at that intersection. What we did is we took the peak hours, right? So you have 2 peak periods, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. We took the storage areas, and then we said about half of those maybe would be, so someone would come, drop off a tractor trailer, and then return and pick it up. During that time, we anticipated the traffic is about 100, we have a traffic expert here, but it's about 3 minutes long. Within those 3 minutes, we anticipate 1 truck either coming or going. So let's say if there was a traffic intersection, the intersection cycle is about 3 minutes. We would anticipate 1 truck during that time. From what we see in the traffic impact study, 1 truck during that time, what's already existing, is not a significant impact. And the DOT accepted this approach.
And then I have one more question. Is the site rated for trucks that sometimes have 2 trailers hitched to it, so that they have turning radius off Route 110 or anything if they were going to drop off 2 trailers or something to park them? Is that in calculation?
We did our truck turn analysis off of the largest vehicle, which we thought at the time was like a semi-trailer, which is one of the largest vehicles we picked, as well as working with the local fire departments, their largest truck. So we did not include that, but we certainly can run the truck turn analysis to see if any of those radiuses would need to be adjusted. And just to go back to your comment on the tractor trailer, again, you see these long queuing driveways. It is very specifically designed. We worked with the planning staff on that to make sure that if there was a truck waiting, it's not, it's on site.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have a question.
Yes,
I'm just looking at the entrance on Broad Hollow Road, and there seems to be an exit that would direct traffic south.
So it
From
still
Broad Hollow
allows if there was a pedestrian vehicle to go south, it's just no trucks can go south. So the way that the exit would be designed, would be a turning radius that a truck would not be able to go to. And
Because
they're,
State DOT said they don't want any truck traffic going south. Is that correct?
yes,
Not from that exit. I
From
mean,
that exit, yes. I get it.
Vehicles could exit Conklin,
Right.
go out to 110 and then go south, but they do not want them going south out of that access
All
point.
right. Thank you for that clarification.
yeah, and the reason for that is their concern was always that if a truck was allowed to exit south, that they would try to cut across the 3 lanes, get into the left turn lane, and do a U-turn, which is also not allowed there. So very specifically, we've had to design that intersection.
So all the truck traffic leaving the site will be directed to Conklin Avenue, in Conklin Avenue East.
That's correct. So there are no tractor trailers that are allowed to then make a left turn going towards the village or any residences. Trucks may only exit right out of the site onto Conklin and going towards.
I just want to follow. So just so we're real clear.
Yes, sir.
And maybe you can state it again. What kind of design will you have that will prevent a tractor trailer from making that left turn towards the village?
So you could kind of see it. And can you guys see my pointer on your screens? Okay. So this radius here, again, this is a rendering, but you'll see it on the design plans, is very deliberate, where we don't allow the tractor trailers to even make this turn. And then exiting, they wouldn't be able to exit as well. You know, there will be significant amount of signage within the site that, again, will let them know that it's a Conklin-only exit. And then once they get to Conklin, they are not allowed to go, and again, we've made it uncomfortable, where they cannot go left. There's also signage required by New York State DOT, not only that will be on our property, but obviously within the area, to not allow those trucks to go that way.
Dan, you have a follow-up? Frank?
On the other end of it, entering the site,
Yes.
where are they entering from?
So entering, they can go down Broad Hollow. We do have a right turn lane that's been created, has been requested by the DOT, and they can enter onto Broad Hollow. Yes?
If they did that, just looking at the interior traffic pattern, would they be able, what would they then do? Would they be able to make the left on the long road? Or how would they then make it?
So they can come into the site, they could go straight, they could come into the site and make a left turn and get to either one of these properties as well.
Because if they went straight, as I'm looking here, it would be difficult for them to make the turn once they got into that back area, correct? They almost should, or not.
So each one of these large areas here, and I know it's misconceiving because it's a rendering, it's about a 100-foot radius. So for instance, if a tractor trailer wanted to come in and turn around and back into this space, they would be allowed to, which would then, if this gate was open, allow them to traverse through.
One other question, dumpsters or trash compactor, what do you have for that?
So each one of the properties does have its own dumpster. Again, in this case, it's on the rear. We have one dumpster that's next to this tenant. Again, this is a smaller 7,000 square foot leasing office. We don't anticipate large amounts of trash there. And then for tenant C, we also have, they could use like the compactor within their building on the loading dock.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Julianne, then we have people in the public we'll hear from as well. Go ahead.
So we see tractor trailers daily under underpasses on parkways that have plenty of signage, for
You know,
height
it's interesting.
restrictions.
One of the things when we first came to the New York State DOT roadway, they were excited about this project. I mean, I just passed by this site over the weekend and I saw tractor trailers just sitting on 110. I think this property brings an opportunity to get a lot of those tractor trailers off the roadways. We can only do so much in controlling what they're going to do, obviously, off the property, but
So for that exit onto 110 that you're saying is only for vehicular turning, is there any way you could put a gate that clearly a truck cannot go under and it cannot go around?
I think it's something we could look into, certainly with planning staff. Again, since it's 3 separate tenants and it's going to be a common exit, we would have to figure out how that works, but we could certainly look into it.
They'll have to make it work. Thank you.
All right, good. I know we have a number of members of the public that would like to address the board. Do we have the cards? All right. Come on up. Could you give this gentleman your card? Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Nancy Sipser, 1207 Melville Road in Farmingdale.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed.
I had prepared remarks, but I think I'm going to wing it instead.
Well, if you want to give him the prepared remarks, you can.
Yeah, I'll
still-
give them at the
You
end.
can still wing it, but then we'll have your prepared remarks.
My civic association, Woodland Civic, did meet with Acadia, and I have to say that I think that they have made a very earnest effort to accommodate everybody's concerns. I think that they are really trying to develop something. They have this white elephant that they're stuck with, and they're making the best of it. They're trying to, to deal with the FAA and the neighborhood and a million other things. But so I think their intentions are good, and we had a good constructive meeting with them. But I think that the town needs to take a step back. This is a Superfund site. There was toxic dumping there for 47 years. And as they identified, one of the sites that the dumping was prevalent in is right up against East Carmans Road. The mitigation by the New York State DEC was to pave it and to only allow industrial use. Those were the 2 mitigations for the fact that it was a Superfund site. Although there's nothing residential going on this property, you literally have houses 100 feet away from the worst part of the dumping. So, and the thing that I find difficult to understand is that diagonally across the street, on the 3 parcels that are by the railroad tracks, which is not a Superfund site, $4 million has been pledged by the state and federal agencies to clean it up. And that is not a Superfund site. This one is. And yet, it's going to be paved over. I think that the town should, and now I also understand that it may be beyond the financial capabilities of Acadia to even clean this, because I have no idea what the financial extent of a cleanup would be. And they may not be able to do it. But I would hope that the town, prior to anything starting, would help secure some funding from state and federal agencies to clean this first. Because people live right across the street. And while we never brought this up before, we never knew it was a Superfund site until last February of '23. We didn't know what it was. It was a Farmingdale joke. We used to call it the Blue Lagoon. While I was in high school 100 years ago, we called it the Blue Lagoon because the water in the sump wouldn't freeze. So it was, everybody knew there was a problem, but nobody knew the extent of the problem. And that problem is still there. And I'm not sure how much money Acadia can dedicate to cleaning it, but I would hope that the town would be aware of the fact that people are living right there. And while it's $4 million across the street, something needs to happen here first. I'm not faulting their design. I understand what they're trying to do. They are trying to make the best of a bad situation that they got stuck with. But I would hope, before anything happens here, that you guys help the residents that are here and apply for funding from somebody to clean it first before they start. That's one thing. The second thing that concerns me is the traffic pattern is really, really awkward. I live on Melville Road, which is an east-west route. And there are very few east-west routes. All 3 actually converge. You have 109 and you have Melville Road and Conklin. They all converge onto one road, which becomes Hempstead Turnpike. And I live directly on Melville Road. Right now, with the trucks coming out, taking a right onto Conklin, there's really no west access. They are going to have to go a long distance in order to go west. They're going to have to go all the way down to 109, or they're going to have to go all the way up to the expressway in order to be able to go westbound, or they are going to head down Millville Road, which is a residential street, which of course is, you know, a personal concern of mine. I don't want to see tractor trailers going down the street. They're not permitted, but what's permitted and what happens are two different things. You know, you still, like you said, you still get trucks on the Southern State Parkway. The signage doesn't matter. You know, what is supposed to happen and what happens differ. So there could be traffic on Millville Road, and to anybody heading west, you want to head to Bethpage with your truck. You got to go all the way up to the expressway. You got to go all the way down to 109. It's not convenient. So I find that traffic pattern difficult. We were told by the fire department the other day that Acadia did try to get the traffic light on 110 so that they would have access onto 110. And that they were not permitted. But I don't know where that light would have been. If the light could be from where the traffic light is right now by Sundown Ski, you know, the side access to the airport plaza, if that could be moved north 30 feet, they would have access on the outer edge of their property, which means that they would have access to going now north and south, and being able to go west by making a left onto Conklin if they wanted to. So this traffic pattern even seems awkward to me and isn't really feasible as far as I can see. Although right now with the constraints that they've been given, this is the best that they can come up with. I'm not faulting them at all. And
Please speak to us. You don't
I'm
have to
sorry.
talk to them.
No, I'm just explaining that as a community member, I'm not objecting to their design, but I'm objecting to how it's going to be accomplished. And I'm asking the town to advocate for the residents and clean this first. Aid them if that's what they need. They may need it. So that's basically it.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And please, give him your written remarks. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board this evening? Sir, come on up.
Sorry, I was a little late. Am I supposed to write the name?
Okay, why don't you give him a thing, and you can come up in the meantime and address the board. Okay, hold on. Do you have oh, this is Daniel Hoffman?
We were on the other side of the building, sorry.
Oh, Danielle Hoffman, okay, hold on. Let's go to the Danielle Hoffman. All right, here we go.
Hi, good evening.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Sure, Danielle Hoffman, 65 Birch Avenue East. I am one of those single-family homes.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed.
Good evening. I am one of the single-family homes right behind this site, and I very much agree that everything should be cleaned up first before anything is even thought about being put here. I'm really concerned about the traffic on Conklin Street. Coming from a parent standpoint, that ambulance has picked my son up 3 times. 3 times. And if they can't get out onto that street because there's trucks or the other way, I mean, I don't know how you would get to the hospital. So I'm really concerned about that traffic onto Conklin because I feel that the firehouse won't be able to have access. So that's my second concern besides the cleanup of the site. And this, I took some notes. All of this ideas of things happening during off hours. There are no off hours. That's our homes. Like, we live there. There are no off hours. We're going to hear everything. And I'll say it right down really quick. I'm sorry. I also had notes, but I emailed them already. I like the idea of it being possible parking lot just for storage of cars, but the idea of anything going in and out, and there's cars that like coming down even Birch Avenue East. And we have a lot of trucks going down Birch Avenue East also, even though there's signs, people don't pay attention. So that's my other concern, is that people who work in this area will be cutting through my street. And my kids are riding on the street. They're on their bikes, they're on their scooters, and there's no safety for them with all these folks whizzing by. This whole plan is bad for me. Everything's bad. I do appreciate the idea of minimal amount of people, that's all great, but I'm just nervous for more folks being around their homes. You know, there is no least impactful approach to this. And I'm also concerned about people having off-site parking around their neighborhood and folks idling their cars there while they're running back and forth between their trucks. And someone said a little more maneuverability for the fire trucks, that's not enough for me because that all has to come out. And if there's any kind of a problem here, our little fire department's not going to be able to handle putting any of this out either by themselves. And beyond that, it's my normal, usual concerns for everything else I'm nervous about. Air pollution in the area. If anybody touches anything here, I'm going to have to spend thousands of dollars to get a water filtration system for my house. I heard someone say the dark skylights, that sounds good, but there would still be light interference into our area. I think that's it. Oh, and the flooding concerns. There's a bunch of water that backs up on that intersection of Broad Hollow Road and Conklin. And I'm also concerned because I think that water has been running into the site. And if the water is no longer running into that site, what does that mean for our neighborhood? Will that water back up into our homes now?
Okay, we will look into that. Very
Sorry,
carefully.
that's it. I'm good. That's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very disorganized and very emotional.
Okay, Anthony DiDomenico. Anthony, state your name and address for the record.
Hello, Anthony DiDomenico, 7 Birch Circle. That's my house right there. You see the backyard?
Swear to tell the truth,
Right
the whole
near the
truth, nothing
Chromium
but the truth.
Superfund site.
Yes, we can see your house from here.
I swear to tell the truth. I would like to say thank you for the design of the landscape. That was my #1 issue, but it seems like it would be lovely. Just a local perspective as somebody who deals with the commercial traffic that already is on East Carmans. That's a lunch spot for tractor trailers. They sit there and they idle all day long. They take their lunch breaks there, so they throw out their trash. It's my responsibility to clean it up. The town is responsible for the other side. So the people that are hired by the town, they could attest for the commercial loitering and polluting that's already doing there. NUCO2, so that is a company, I guess the best way to describe it is right there. So that blasts NUCO2 from 11 a.m. to 4 a.m. It's very incredibly loud. The airplanes, obviously, I knew that going in, but it's random. Sometimes it's nice when Memorial Day we see the Blue Angels come over, but again, sound traffic, and that's basically my point, is a total assessment of sound traffic with multiple tractor trailers and parking, the ones that are already, because there's also another tractor trailer parking all the way down East Carmans where it turns. There's already a lot there. So tractor trailers are continuing all night. And trash pickups, when would that be for rodent infestation? I mean, as long as those fences are there, I think that would be all right, right? And then the third thing was addressed by the previous person. So, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming this evening. John, let's see, John Loth, how am I pronouncing it? Roth? Please state your name and address for the record.
I'm John Loth, Republic Airport, 7150 Republic Airport, East Farmingdale.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed.
All right. I just have a quick statement. I do have copies, when I'm done, that I can give everyone. Good evening. My name is John Loth. I'm the airport manager at Republic Airport. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we have been working with Acadia to address some of the concerns described below, and they have accommodated where possible. Republic Airport is owned by the people of the state of New York and is the responsibility of New York State Department of Transportation. As a recipient of millions of dollars of capital investment from the FAA, the DOT is obliged to follow grant insurances under the Airport Improvement Program. One of these insurances are the Grant Insurance 21, and it relates to compatible land use. It says in part that the airport sponsor will take appropriate action, including the adoption of zoning laws to the extent reasonable to restrict the use of land adjacent to and in the immediate vicinity of the airport to activities and purposes compatible with normal airport operations, including landing and takeoff of aircraft. Acadia Republic Farmingdale LLC is proposing to develop property at the intersection of Broad Hollow and Conklin Street in East Farmingdale. The property is also located in the approach and departure path of landing and takeoff of aircraft off of runway 1432 at Republic Airport. The approach and departure paths contain runway protection zones, as you heard in the meeting. There is an approach RPZ and a departure RPZ. They're different in size. They're designed to enhance the safety and the protection of people and property on the ground. The primary goals are to clear the RPZs of incompatible objects and activities and to ensure the area remains clear of such objects and activities. New buildings are not considered compatible with the RPZ, as noted for the departure route. It was noted earlier, New York State DOT Aviation has worked with Acadia to mitigate congregation of the general public in the RPZs. Acadia, in fact, changed the proposed development significantly to that end. And Acadia has agreed to add deed restrictions, as stated, to ensure land use remains the same as proposed. In addition, DOT has navigation easements over the property, and Acadia and their consultant, including VHB, have limited the building heights accordingly. So they try to protect some of the things that they could. That said, there's still some improvements that can be made with the proposed development of the two buildings, B and C respectively. So we would like to recommend that building B and C be eliminated or moved out of the central part of the RPZ to conform with the FAA requirements. New York State Aviation additionally provided comments as part of the New York State DOT highway work permit and process similar to the comments above. And New York State DOT Aviation and Acadia continue to work with the FAA to ensure the land use is compatible for the runway protection zone.
Thank you. I'm very, very familiar with the important role that you play, and the reason is back in the early mid-'80s, I was the local assemblyman and sponsored the bill putting the New York State Department of Transportation, Aviation, Norman Levy, the senator from the area, sponsored the Senate bill. So you have a very important role. Now, as I'm listening to you, I have one simple question.
Yeah.
Is the Department of Transportation going to approve that access point on Broad Hollow Road? When it was proposed in the past, they didn't.
In the past, they hadn't. They compromised with the shifting of the roadway. Yeah. And I can't answer for that department.
Okay, but you can answer for your department. At least your interest in this as the manager.
Yeah. At the manager of the airport, but I really do not have any say in regards to the roadways in the highway department. Sorry.
Any other questions? No, if you could give him your copy of
sure.
Your information, that would be great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Okay. Give him your certificate
Thank
of
you.
attendance. Please state your name and address.
Donna Sullivan, 52 Cedar Avenue.
Do you
Farm-
swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the
Yes,
truth?
sir, I do.
Please proceed.
So I don't know if you remember me from Prologix. That building is Prologix. This one is way better than Prologix. They are willing to help the firehouse. They are doing what is required of them. They are transparent. If anything is going to get approved for East Farmdale, this seems better than any other thing that's going on right now. Because this does not affect the firehouse. I know she said that it does. But this, they're going to help the firehouse. And they'll be able to get on Conklin Street, not like Prologix, who has thousands of trucks. But this is a way better presentation, transparency. Like, they seem like a reasonable company to deal with. There's no lying, there's no lying, there's no misleading. They are telling you the way it is. They're willing to work.
Refreshing.
Yes,
these days.
it's amazing. It really is amazing, because
Please
I've
proceed.
been fighting Prologix for a long time. So this company is honest. We need honest in Farmingdale. I mean, if you're going to approve something, if they can come up with better things that everybody is happy with, then, I mean, they're going to approve the site. Yes, the contamination, I agree 100%. Get money to clean up that site, because that is horrible. But they seem like a better company than Prologix. They really do. So I'm here as a positive tonight, not as a negative. No book to hand in, no Channel 12 News, no anybody.
No, we appreciate you coming.
Yes, thank you very much.
And thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? If not, counsel?
Thank you. If I may, I'm just going to call up our environmental consultant just to give some context to the environmental issues affecting the property and what will have to be done if and when the site is developed as this project, in accordance with this project.
Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Jeffrey Wills, W-I-L-L-S, with RU Environmental Engineering and Geology, DPC.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed.
Sure. So I just want to touch in a little bit more about the environmental impacts on this particular site. Like Josh spoke to earlier, this was a DEC-led investigation in consultation with the New York State Department of Health. So the DEC are the ones that took over the investigation of this property, did the full characterization to understand the nature and extent of the contamination on this site. And so as Josh spoke earlier, there were two main areas of concern, the chromium, which we spoke about in soil, as well as the PCBs in soil. One thing to understand about this particular type of contamination is it's immobile. So it's in soil, and really the only way for it to go anywhere is to physically move it. So the DEC, with their investigation, and then came with their record of decision, and with that, they consider what's the impact to the surrounding community when it comes to what remediation they're going to recommend for a particular site. And for this particular site and this particular contamination, capping is the most appropriate. It's something that's done on thousands of sites. A lot of sites, in my career, I've been involved in a lot of redevelopment type projects in the 5 boroughs, and this is an acceptable way to handle this type of contamination on site to make sure that you're eliminating the pathway of exposure. And for this type of contamination, that pathway to exposure is physically touching this material, getting it on you, eating it, ingesting it. Those are the issues with this type of contamination. So capping is definitely an appropriate remediation for this particular site. And to one thing too, to state, with the redevelopment of this site, there is going to be soil impacting material that is going to be removed and disposed of off-site at a permanent facility. So some of the material, the impacts are going to be removed just by the development, the planned development they want to do. So just to understand that, and again, to understand the remediation for this site was motivated by the DEC, the regulatory agency that oversees this type of contamination.
So just so we're clear, for the record, you're stating this is the DEC's, DEC has the overall authority in determining how this is to be cleaned up, because I know that some 26 years ago in 1998, the town of Babylon had requested that the site be cleared much more extensively than it has been. But that is a DEC determination.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Dan, hold on.
A question for
Sorry,
you.
please.
So with the proposed work, a rough number, what percentage do you think of this contaminated soil may be removed and appropriately disposed of at an off-site location that removes these toxins from the soil?
I don't know if we have the full.
I won't hold you to it.
Yeah, I don't know if we have a full understanding of the volume or the quantity of that.
That's a fair answer.
But understanding, what they're doing here, it's in the areas of the impacted zones, those will be affected by the development.
Okay. And then with the capping, just because if I were to live in the area, I would have the same concerns. By capping it and removing a portion of it, whatever percentage it would be, that would prevent any of the touching or concerns that.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, the cap for this site cover, so-called site cover, will be the asphalt, the concrete pads, the buildings, and then at least 1 foot of clean material on top of any landscaped areas.
And so let's say that the concrete or the asphalt starts to break away as trucks drive on it.
Sure.
What is the remedy for that or remediation to ensure that it doesn't?
Absolutely. So this site will have what's called a site management plan attached to it. That is a living document that will be forever go on with this site. And part of the requirements for this site is it has to be certified annually. So there will be annual inspections that are done for this site and have to be certified by a professional engineer to ensure that the cap is maintained properly and in good condition. No, it's an annual review, but if there are, say, weather events, bad weather events, that will trigger a more periodic review of the site cover. But it is a plan that's going to have to be followed for as long as this property is maintained.
Okay, thank you, Frank.
When the drainage is installed,
Mm-hmm.
and you go to install the drainage, will that soil that's being removed during the drainage operation, that'll be monitored and removed from site, anything that's contaminated?
Right. Anything excess that needs soil that needs to be removed for the development will be taken off site for disposal. Absolutely.
Okay. But you said that the only way that this can be spread or moved is through physically moving it. So you said excess.
Meaning through the development, like they're removing whatever soil that has to be removed to install their, say, foundation elements for their buildings, things like that.
Right. My question is it going to be moved, stored over here, and then moved to different locations on the site, or will it be removed from the site if it's contaminated? That's my question.
Right.
Because you're going to dig a hole to put the foundation in, and you're going to disturb 2,000 yards of material. What then happens with that material, since the only way to move it and to move the contaminant is to physically move it?
Sure.
So you're exactly right. So that soil management plan goes through right there. And there's also very specific DEC guidelines, to your point, where we can't put drainage. So there is areas that we are not allowed to put drainage. There's areas that as they excavate a foundation, you can see where a lot of those foundations are not within those footprints. But if there is a foundation with that small building B, that is hauled off-site and then disposed of appropriately. And again, there's an entire soil management plan that the DEC has to approve based on foundations, drainage, anything and everything when it comes to excavation.
Julianne?
So during the excavation process, how do you contain that soil? When you say that this can't be moved, that it's in the soil, but then if we come into some rainy days, how is that contained when there are many residents that have come before public hearings stating their road gets flooded?
So during excavation, we're going to have a soil management plan in place to dictate how the soil has to be managed, right? So if they're excavating in an area of the obvious known contamination, that has to be handled in a certain way. I don't know if the logistics have to be figured out first, but a lot of the times when we're doing that type of excavation and it's material that's going to be taken off site for disposal, it's going to be live loaded into trucks and then covered and taken off site. During that time, during any of the invasive activities on this site during redevelopment, we're going to be doing community air monitoring. So we're going to have meters set up around the perimeter of the entire site that's going to be monitoring particulates, dust, as well as any organic vapors, even though we don't have any issues with this particular site when it comes to organics, but we're still going to be monitoring for it. So we'll have upwinds and downwinds, so we'll be able to track the amount of dust, and there are thresholds that we have to be within, and if the threshold is exceeded, work stops, and mitigative steps are put in place. Dust suppression is put in place to make sure that there's nothing leaving the site and potentially impacting the community.
Okay. And as you know, these go to facilities that have the ability to properly dispose of and eliminate any contaminants that are in that soil.
That's exactly right. It'll have to go to a permitted facility.
That's right. So all of that is carefully
Thank you.
monitored.
And now, just before I provide my closing comments, I'd just like to have Mr. Bissinger address the suggestion associated with the airport in relocating buildings B and C.
Could you just pan to the diagram? That's the zoomed out view. The other one, go the other way. Yeah, of the airspace. This is one more. Yeah, and so if you go by the FAA published rules, the airport is actually obligated to buy the land as a first step to control private property. In the instance they don't purchase the land, they have to work with the property owner. A project here with a single building with no buildings and the departure RPZ, so the second dashed line that you see with all of the buildings shaded in red, that's planes taking off. Generally within discussions with our aviation consultant, that's the lower risk area. The landing zone is completely clear. And so the two buildings we're proposing are more or less in alignment with what's existing today in that zone. So in a perfect world, there would be no buildings there. Unfortunately, this project requires 3 buildings, a multi-tenant plan, and we were unable to come up with a project that would be financially viable with no buildings in either RPZ. So this is what we call the compromise plan. It's our best effort to come up with something that solves the aviation issues. It's not perfect, but it's very, very good. And I think everyone would be comfortable with it pending FAA sign off. So that's just to clarify.
Just one other comment to address.
So there was a question about.
Hold on.
Yes.
Dan has another question.
I just want to understand something to done. The RPZs are areas that are put in place to protect from something happening should a plane not be able to take off from land, correct? And from your understanding and your investigation of the RPZs, what's the normal response time if a plane were to land for this area to be cleared with the current conditions of people? Houses, people on 110, things like that.
don't know I don't think we know the response time of the local fire department. I don't think I could opine on that.
And the reason why I ask is that you only plan to have 95 people plan for this whole site of 19 acres, which maybe 2 will be in building B and 2 or 3 in building C, correct?
What's the question, sir? I'm not
My question is, how many people do you think are going to be in those buildings at this time?
In the building?
Okay,
In
hold
the-
on,
in the
hold on,
B and
hold
C
on.
buildings
I
is
don't want
the
anybody speculating for the record, please.
it's-
Let's not have that.
Very hard to say.
Okay, Dan, that's a very interesting question. Unless you're Sully Sullenberger and he's letting you know I'm going to land in the Hudson. No, they don't usually announce it that far in advance. Council, did you want to add?
Just, there was one other comment regarding the traffic conditions.
So there was one question about, I think it was fire department and ambulance timing. Currently, right now, we're working with the fire department, and ambulances have what's called preemption on the traffic signals. We've spoken with the fire department. They have access to this preemption. That means if they need to get through that traffic signal really quickly, that they have a button to do that. And one of the questions that the fire department did have for us is that if they needed, or if they felt that they needed additional, there's a camera on top of the fire, on top of the traffic signals, and if they felt that they, for whatever, needed additional signals to pick up that we would work with the New York State DOT. Those cameras are typically in their right-of-way, and we would provide those. They already exist at the traffic signals, but if they needed more, we would certainly help with that. And then there was one other question about the Broad Hollow and how come there couldn't be a traffic signal. You can see there's an aviation, it's actually an easement that John mentioned. So if you see there's a traffic signal on Broad Hollow across from Airport Plaza. So as you can see, that's right on the corner of the property. So we don't own the property to the left of that, Sundown. We don't own that property. And then that diagonal almost box is actually that aviation easement. So those are aviation easements that were mentioned previously. So we also can't develop in there. So that's the reason why there's no traffic signals along Broad Hollow.
Thank you.
Hold on, come on up.
The applicant had previously submitted no hazards to air navigation. Those letters are no longer valid. We do need the new letters. You can submit those. We need those to proceed with the project.
Thank you, Mr. Groh.
We'll definitely take care of that.
Council, please proceed.
Thank you, and I'll be very brief. Thank you for your time this evening. I think that the testimony presented, and in fact, many of the comments from the public, confirm that this is a difficult site, but it is a very good development for the property. When you put it in context and consider that this board itself approved many years ago a Stu Leonard's, which would have generated far, far more traffic, far more activity on the site, on the local roadways, this development, this project, and its associated trip generation is extremely low considering and comparing to that one. Is it perfect? As Josh said, no, it's not perfect, but few things are in this world. This is a very good attempt to accommodate not only the town's zoning and planning requirements, but the Republic Airport, the FAA, the DOT, and the community at large. So we hope the board will give this appropriate consideration. We'll continue to work with the planning staff on any concerns or comments that they have, and we thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much. I'm going to request a motion from the board to close the public hearing, and we're going to reserve our decision because there'll be a number of outstanding comments. So, Julianne, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close.
Okay, second by Dan. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
The hearing is closed, and as I said, we're going to reserve decision. The decision has been reserved in order for us to review feedback that we've received this evening and any open site plan issues. The record will remain open and written for comments until June 24th. To follow up on the status of the application or to submit additional written comments, you may contact the Planning Department in the following ways. One is in person. The planning department is located on the west wing of the town hall. Applications, documents, plans are available for inspection between the hours of 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. or via phone, 631-957-3103, or via email, planning comments, that's one word, planning comments @townofbabylon.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much.